I mean, we live on the Gulf Coast. I've been through 2 hurricanes in the past 10 years, and inevitably one's going to come. And you know who's going to show up? LDS Disaster Relief from the Bishop's Storehouse. I've seen him before. We're going to see him again. And so there's clearly, like, what we would in the Protestant world called common grace, ways that God commonly blesses people. There's clearly ways that we can partner with there, and those are really interesting to me.
Hello, welcome to the Leading Saints podcast. Now, if you're not aware, something pretty awesome is happening the weekend of this release of this episode you're listening to right now. We are in the middle of a virtual conference that we are helping out Hello Saints, Pastor Jeff McCullough really pull off and execute and make it awesome. And so I wanted to feature a session that I was involved in that is part of this Hello Saints virtual summit, and it was such a fun discussion. I wanted to give you an early glimpse at it and then encourage you to go sign up for free. There's still an opportunity to see all the sessions that have happened, so go sign up for free at Hello Saints. I'll put the link and everything in the description to this episode, and you're going to love it. So this episode, I sit down through the magic of the internet with 4 evangelical pastors. You see, we did an interview on the flip side where Pastor Jeff, sits down with 3 bishops, me being one of those bishops, and so we wanted to do the same thing, but the other way around. Does that make sense? Where I sit down with evangelical pastors, and we talk about general leadership things. What's it like being a pastor? What's a day in the life like? What has you most concerned? What's burnout like for a pastor? And just these little things that we could learn from maybe a different faith experience, and maybe gather what we can and improve our own leadership. So here is a sneak peek of the full interview that I had with 4 evangelical pastors, and you're going to love it. And be sure to go to the notes with this episode and head on over to Hello Saints and sign up for free and enjoy the rest of the summit. And so here is my interview with 4 evangelical pastors. Hey everyone, my name is Kurt Frankum with Leading Saints, and I have the opportunity to host this session of the Hello Saints Virtual Summit. Even though Jeff is on stage with me, I'm taking control and leading out here. Because before, Jeff and I, with 2 other Latter-day Saint bishops, we had a panel discussion that Jeff led as a pastor, and we talked about some of those dynamics that Latter-day Saint church leaders experience. And so we're kind of turning the tables on that dynamic, where I'm the Latter-day Saint bishop who is talking with 4 fantastic evangelical Protestant pastors. And we're going to just have a good, casual, friendly conversation, see what we learn, discover. And they seem like a group of great guys. So there may be some laughter here and there, and I welcome that. So just by way of introduction, maybe, Jeff, let's start with you. I'd love to just go around the room and just maybe give a paragraph introduction, put yourself into context, how long you've been pastoring, where you're from, those types of things.
Yeah. So as far as I'm concerned, I pastored in Belleville, Illinois for many years, and pastored alongside Curtis, not at the same church, but our church is partnered quite a bit.
Yep.
And I have been in various roles in ministry, which is a pretty common thing. I think all 4 of us are going to start nodding our heads when I talk about the typical path that a lot of pastors take, where you kind of have an interest in student ministry / youth ministry, you dabble in that for a while, then maybe go and get some more education or ordination. And Kyle, I don't know if you were in there, but I did music for a while as well. But eventually, after moving beyond what was more of a volunteer type of situation for me, became full-time at a church almost 15 years ago. And pastored up until a couple years ago, whenever I stepped aside to focus more on Hello Saints and relocating to Utah.
Awesome. Curtis, let's go with you next.
Hey, yeah, I am Curtis Gilbert, and like Jeff mentioned, I was able and been blessed to pastor alongside him in what we call the Metro East, which is kind of the Illinois suburbs of St. Louis, and been pastoring for many years. Started as a youth pastor, even at the church that I'm leading at now, was a youth pastor. Left for about a decade to lead another church, and I'm a year and a half back into leading as a senior pastor of this church in a community called Shiloh, Illinois.
Awesome. Kyle, let's jump to you next.
I'm a pastor in Mobile, Alabama, where I've been serving at a non-denominational church for 11 years, and I've run the gambit of responsibilities, right? Anything from facilities to preaching and teaching. Mainly what I do now is preaching and teaching and counseling. Married, we have a little girl, originally from Indiana, so not from Mobile, Alabama, if you're wondering what's wrong with the accent. But I also have a keen interest in studying the Latter-day Saint faith and tradition. So when I did my PhD at Southern Seminary in religious studies, I looked at a schism, the history of a schism within the LDS history. And I have a book coming out as an introduction to LDS faith and practice and traditions for a traditional Christian audience.
Awesome. Then we'll end with introductions with my fellow Utah, Nate.
Yeah, my name's Nate Fox. I'm a pastor in Harriman, Utah, and my story of becoming a pastor is pretty untimely. Like I went to Bible school in Chicago, Moody Bible Institute, met my wife there, and then I was working in kind of the sports apparel industry, kind of launched my career into that, but kind of dabbling in what's called church planting, where I was hanging out with other guys who were starting brand new churches. Did that in the Seattle Tacoma area, and then wasn't really full time as a pastor, but just helping out as I could. And then my career took me to a sports apparel company in Provo, Utah. Moved here 22 years ago as a marketing director, product development director, and then in 2010, after a career in that, I ended up becoming the youth pastor at a church called Centerpoint Norm. And I was there for about a decade. And now I'm lead pastor at a church called Lifestone Church in Harriman, Utah. So a little bit different pathway than a lot of guys, but I'm here in Utah, and I love being a pastor here.
Awesome. Well, and this kind of will launch us into the first question I have, just from my own context. Here I was living in a condo in South Salt Lake, sort of the inner city, newlywed, just a few years, and had no intention of going into a ministry, as you may call it, or being asked to be the lead pastor or a bishop of a congregation. But as you know, we function by a lay ministry, and just the nature of that ward with a bunch of with our condominium complex, a bunch of apartments, leadership was generally called on in a younger age. So I'm a 28-year-old marketing grad. I get the phone call to come meet with our stake president. And the invitation is extended to me to serve as the bishop of the Lee Ward, or the Lee Ward congregation, for about 5 years. And so there I was, thrust into that, trying to swim more than I sank, and learning all sorts of things. And so I'm curious just about that dynamic of the calling. In our faith tradition, the calling is almost overly formalized, where it's sort of like your assignments, what you've been asked to do to help out around the church. But if someone would ask you, like, where did this calling of service come or start? How would you tell that story or summarize that story?
I'll go ahead. So I grew up in a pastor's family. We moved quite a bit all over the country, into Canada. Did a little missionary stint for 3 years in Cameroon, West Africa. So pastor, missionary, kid, and we call it MKPK in the evangelical world. And I was also homeschooled. So I homeschooled kid, pastor's kid, missionary kid. I got all the strikes against me. There's no reason I should be okay. I don't know if that's a joke that anybody else will get, but it's a joke in the evangelical community. That being said, along the way, even as a kid, we grow up in church, and back in the probably the 80s and 90s, this was more prevalent, Sunday school. And I know that's a thing in the LDS community, but we'd go to Sunday school, and I remember Sunday school teachers going, "You're going to be a pastor someday." It's just that affirmation. You're going to be a pastor someday, and it was always, I took it as a compliment because I really do like my dad. It's like hey, I could be like dad someday. That was just a little kid dreaming of kind of going, okay, I like my dad, I could be like dad. But then later in high school, I was like, nah, I don't want to be a pastor. That sounds terrible. And really started to look into other things, and but that same messaging from my Fellowship of Christian Athletes leader, other people in ministry going, hey, I really think you might want to pursue that. And so that came to a head after graduating for me, right around my senior year of high school, praying about this a lot more. Crazy enough, I went to high school, I was in choir, and I had a choir teacher that had graduated from the Moody Bible Institute in Chicago, and he was amazing, great mentor, wonderful man, and he poured into me a ton, and I was like, I'm going to go to Moody, I'm going to go figure it out. And sure enough, right before going to Moody, I just really sensed God was laying on my heart to go into ministry. And then it didn't happen. Like I said before in my introduction, I wasn't in full-time ministry for like another 14 years. And so it was like, God was like, pause, and the coolest thing about it is sensing not just a call to ministry, but a call to ministry here in Utah. And all of the nuances that kind of flow in and out of what it's like to do ministry with LDS people and with people in this culture. And I love it. And I feel called to this. And I had an experience moving out here. And this wasn't for ministry. Like I said, I moved out here for marketing and product development with a sports company. But I remember having this experience right as we were about to cross the Columbia River from Washington into Oregon, right there by Vancouver and Portland. And we were moving to Provo, Utah. Didn't know anybody except all the guys that I worked with at a company called Prolix Sports. And they were all really devout, returned missionaries, buddies from Southern Utah University. And I didn't know anybody else. And I said, I feel like we're going to Utah, and I told my wife this, I feel like this is more than just a job. This is a ministry. This is a calling. This is a mission, and deeply sensed it in that moment in a parking lot at a Fred Meyer, and then crossing the river into Oregon and driving the rest of the way to Utah, going, okay, this is where God wants me to be. And I've been here for 22 years. For a guy who's only lived about 2.5, 3 years everywhere during the course of my entire life, for God to kind of plant me here for 22 years straight is a little odd. It feels weird. But my wife and I have raised our family here. We love it here. But I don't think we would have stuck if there wasn't a profound sense of calling from the Holy Spirit to be here.
Yeah, that's awesome. Curtis, what about you? Did God put this calling on your heart?
Yeah, he did. I think my story is, a bit different, and much of my younger years was not what we call walking with the Lord in any way, or Christian in any way. I lived life for myself, and passionately did so. And so I went off to college at our state university to study business. It was the number one business school at the time in the area that I was focusing in. And I went there because I just wanted to make a lot of money and leave the Metro East. And that's actually was my plan for the rest of my life, is just be either vice president of sales and marketing or CEO or whatever the case may be. A year after college, that's when I that's when Jesus just invaded my life. And it was soon after that where uh, Christianity and Jesus Christ became real to me, that I sense kind of that call. Like, I think there's something else he's going to do in my life. To be honest, I didn't want that. I love business, still do love business. In fact, I have been looking for a way out of ministry for a long time. The Lord was like, "Nah, this is what you gonna do, fool. Quit asking." Uh, and so, soon after that, I just was surrounded with community that, one, I knew enough that he was calling me to do something, just to help people. I had a love for his word. I thought it was just on the side as volunteer, but just through circumstances, and through the encouragement of my wife and friends, I stepped into youth ministry, and that's when I realized, okay, I think it's more than just a hobby or a side activity. That I think it's actually supposed to be my whole life. And I've been doing it ever since. That was 2006 or 7 that I stepped in, and here I am, still at it. And the best I could say is, man, the calling is like what the scripture says. The word of the Lord came. It's like that. That's kind of how it came. It's like, as mysterious and weird as that sounds. It's like, hey, man, I wouldn't be here if Jesus didn't call me. I had other options. He just overrode those. And so, and I said that with joy, as in, I get to be a part of serving God's people. So that's my story.
Awesome. And I would imagine, I mean, I'm sure, God puts puts an invitation of service or a calling on an individual's heart, but that doesn't necessarily mean they have to go full time, or maybe it's just a volunteer effort, or, I mean, it's probably all over the place, right? Yeah.
I would say most people function in that way. And I think that's a good thing,
Right.
The goal is to give your life away in whatever capacity that he calls you to.
Yeah. Let's go to Kyle. Tell us the brief story of how you were called into ministry.
Yeah, my story sounds like it parallels a bit with Curtis's story. If you were to tell me when I was, in my early 20s, I was going to be a pastor, I would laugh out loud at you. Like, there's no way that would be who I would become. But the Lord has other plans. In evangelicalism, calling to become a pastor is typically slow and informal, and there's kind of a lot of streams that pull into it. There is this kind of inner subjective tug to ministry. There's a very famous Baptist London pastor, Charles Spurgeon, who basically says, like, look, if you can see yourself doing anything else besides preaching, go do it. But if you can't, and God has fixed you in this certain way, pursue it, and pursue it relentlessly. So there is that kind of like inner tug, and then there's kind of external affirmation. People out of nowhere. So have you ever considered being a pastor, or, your natural talents and the spiritual giftings that the Holy Spirit have given you are kind of pointing in a certain direction? I don't know if you have noticed that or not. And then just like looking back at your life and how the Lord orchestrates certain seasons of your life to prepare you to enter into local ministry. We've had incredible opportunities. We got to live overseas for a season in Germany and England, and in those times in Germany, because we were English speakers, we were like quickly promoted to teaching English speaking Bible studies. So like ministering to people by teaching in discipleship one-on-one in evangelism. That was kind of our first stop. We moved to England, to Cambridge, and we lived there for 3 years, and we were given the opportunity to lead and to oversee a cluster of community groups, discipleship groups. So that kind of, got our appetite wet for ministry. And then a church in Mobile, Alabama, that we had been associated with before we left the United States called, and they said, like, this is a long shot. Would you ever want to come back to the Gulf Coast? We have a position for you. It's going to be like the pastor of Miscellanea. Long story short, the church that I'm a part of, like, accidentally planted a second church. It started as a Bible study and just blew up. And so they said, like, we know you, we sense like God's calling you to ministry. Would you ever come back? And that was a really big step of faith for us, moving from Cambridge to Mobile, Alabama. But the Lord blessed that and honored it. And there's not quite an instruction manual for ministry, but what I've noticed is there are other men and women around you that God intentionally places around you to help you. And so I've been personally enriched by ministry by being in this role. It's difficult. The burnout rate is very, very high for pastors. So if you don't have that calling, like some days when I come home, it's just because the calling is still there that I want to keep going, like that I want to return that next Sunday. So yeah, that's a great question and probably a pretty mysterious, opaque process from the LDS perspective looking in.
Awesome. Jeff, what about you? What's your story?
Yeah, it seems like I articulate quite often how I ended up in Utah being a YouTube pastor, but there's so much backstory there. I grew up in a Christian family, and it was, probably junior high camp that I went to in 1993 that I was like, I want to go into ministry. I want to be a pastor. And then never thought about it again. Every kid that goes to camp wants to be a pastor when they get back from camp. They want to be a youth pastor.
Is that what happens? Is that one of those things?
They want to be a youth. They either want to be a youth pastor or be a camp counselor. That's what it is. So, yeah, I pretty much went into college. My mom telling me you're going to be a pastor one day, and me saying no, thank you. But I started leading worship. I was really involved in the music at the church, and in 2000, pretty much took the position as the main worship leader at the church I grew up at. And that was when I was graduating high school, going into college, and interned at that church for a summer during college. And it was after that internship that I was like, no thanks. I don't think ministry is for me. Internships will do that. Didn't one of y'all just say that too, that you did an internship and it was like, no thanks. So yeah, the long and the short of it is I, got the degree in audio video production, went into radio, TV, marketing. I was working at a company called Network Solutions in Swansea, Illinois, and I was standing outside of HR after I just fired a guy. And it was almost a Damascus Road type of experience almost. I just felt the Lord quite clearly say, this isn't it. This ain't it. Like, I want you to take all of these desires, passions, giftings I've given you and use them for something that's more directly tied to eternity. So that was probably 2007, and contacted, the church that I was associated with at the time. Started helping out with student ministry because my wife and I did that when we were in college. We did some college ministry. And so yeah, 2008 was technically when I really started pressing into ministry while I was still in the corporate world. And here's the deal, and it's crazy how this works out. It was a big decision for us because we're stepping out of, I was flying up the corporate ladder, secure job, insurance, we're getting ready to have kids. It didn't really make sense. I mean, contrary to the stigmas attached to it, pastors do not make money. Okay, we're vocational. A lot of us, we get paid to do our ministry, but it ain't that much. So we were looking at a pay cut. We were looking at worse insurance, all that stuff. And I met with this church. I met with the church leadership. There was a desire to bring me on in an administrative role that would be sort of an understudy role to move into more of a pastoral role. And when we joined, I prayed about it for a couple years and finally said yes. A softball size growth was discovered in my wife's abdomen right after one of our kids was born. Our house that same summer was falling into a coal mine. It was our first house we ever built. So bricks are falling away from the house. We couldn't open doors. And it seems like everything tied to our livelihood was crumbling around us. We could not find a doctor that was willing to operate on Joy. We went to the best abdominal surgeon at WashU, and he's like, I'm not touching this. And it was about a year-long process of us being like, Lord, you've called us into ministry. We're stepping out, and it seems like everything's falling apart. And it was a matter, it took about a year before the Lord brought the right physicians in and healed Joy. It was over a year for us to get our house situation figured out. We were able to sell it, take insurance money, get out of the what we call the crack house because there were cracks all over it.
Jeff, as a pastor, when you write that book, the title "From Crack House to Ministry,"
from crack house to church. Yep, that's it. That's gonna sell.
I love you too.
Yeah. So right when all that stuff started to get resolved, we said yes. We notified the church that we were going to come on staff. I was going to start as sort of a ministry coordination role with the idea of stepping into greater pastoral responsibilities. And the week that I said yes to that church, I was promoted to Director of Design Services at Network Solutions.
Oh, wow.
And here we are again. The Lord just like wave after wave being like, you sure about this? You sure about this? And we were sure about it. I didn't want to bang the hollow drum of the corporate world anymore. I wanted to go into ministry. So I said yes to the position because I wasn't ready to put in my 2 weeks. And a couple months later, we stepped away and launched into ministry, and we've been doing it ever since.
Yeah. Yeah, those are awesome stories. And I don't think, maybe you don't realize just how much we, at least me as a Latter-day Saint, how much I appreciate those type of stories, because in our faith with the lay ministry, if somebody shows up to church on Sunday and it mentions someone, wow, I just feel the Lord on my heart, I feel like I'm being called to be the next bishop of this ward, they would look at you like, dude, like you got to pump the brakes. Like, what gives you the right to do those things? And it seems maybe upside down or backwards when you compare those things. And this is part of our culture that I'm hoping to help shift, where, because as we read in Timothy, like if you desire the office of a bishop, you desire good work, and I want people to feel like, yeah, you have purpose here. Like God's calling you into this. And sometimes we get overly formalized with our, we're going to ask you to just teach Sunday school and just don't, just do that for now, where there's maybe more potential to really allow people to feel a calling in their congregation and lean into that and see what the Lord has for them. And these stories are just example of how that can bless your life, even when that opposition comes. So it's really, really powerful. So I'm curious to know, like, how would you explain your typical week as a pastor? Because obviously this is your full-time focus. And so, I mean, how would you summarize a typical week in the life of you as a pastor?
So Mondays is my day of rest, my day off, and so that's at home with family. And then the rest of the days are pretty much broken up. And then the first part of the day, I am either sermon prepping or doing some sort of strategic work of some kind. And in the afternoons, there are meetings. So there are meetings with advisory teams, staff meetings, one-on-ones, counseling meetings, and then outside of what we would call community group, I don't have regular evening requirements outside of community group, and then counseling here and there, but they're not standing. And then Saturday morning, some final sermon prep, and then Sunday morning, a little bit more sermon prep, and then I'm preaching, and then I'm done, and I'm eating Chinese. That's my week.
And I just want to point something out too. That the whole concept here of that Monday being a day off or Friday being a day off, that's pretty common for pastors, for people who are Latter-day Saint who might not know that, because Sundays they're draining for us. And also Latter-day Saints might not know this whole concept of community groups or home groups. It's something that probably over the last 20, 25 years has really taken root, and you probably are hard pressed to find a Protestant church that doesn't have some form of home groups where, we go to church with each other on Sundays, but then, either once a week, once every couple weeks, maybe once a month, you're assigned to a home group or community group where you meet in each other's homes. You have a meal, you might do a Bible study, you might have a prayer time, you might, I don't know, play washers out back, but it's just a time to get people together. So,
Yep.
I think maybe Kyle mentioned alluded to this as far as that, obviously there's some pluses and minuses of being a pastor and the livelihood and the demands you have and, the burnout that comes from these things. Like I remember feeling that as a bishop, but at least I knew that there was a sunset to this calling. It was generally a 5-6 year thing. And I knew that there was life after this type of thing. And I'm just curious as far as not only the burnout dynamic, but also sometimes the validation that can coax people into these roles that maybe they're misinterpreting that validation for as a calling from God. I mean, what thoughts come to mind as far as reconciling that validation that comes as being the lead pastor or the guy on the stage on Sundays?
I'm going to let one of these other guys talk more than me, but I'm just going to say right off the bat, burnout is a real thing. It is a problem with pretty much every pastor. I mean, it's an issue. It's a problem. And every guy on this call, I guarantee, we've reached points where we're like, I got nothing left. There's nothing left in me. And the demands that are on us from so many different directions, people's personal situations, running the corporate side of the church, preaching sermons every week, making sure that, you're pressing forward, keeping people I mean, it's running a family. Like it's quite a bit. It's a pretty serious malady for anybody that serves in a pastoral role.
Yeah, we have a phrase around this. It's called Sunday is always coming. As soon as and I think there's an extra level when you are coming up with the talks from scratch, like you're coming up with these sermons or messages, as we call them. There's an extra level of pressure because you get out of service on a Sunday, and then Sunday night kind of hits, and you're like, all right, Sunday's coming again. I got to re-up. It's that feeling that you had in college where it's like, okay, this is another 10-page paper. I got to come up with. I got to study. I got to do the passage of Scripture justice. We firmly hold to this that we want to rightly handle the word of truth, as Paul instructs Timothy, and that carries weight with it. But then you don't want to get up there and bore everybody for 35 minutes. So being interesting carries a lot of weight to it. And then knowing like what season you're in. Are we going to go through a book of the Bible? Are we going to do a topical series? Are we going to, try to be very exegetical, or is there, marriages that need help in the congregation? How do we assess what needs to be taught from God's word? That carries another level of weight to it as well. And so you're like, what's interesting to me is, as being a lead pastor, and that's only been true for me for a little while, about 7-8 months now, where I'm carrying more of the weight of preaching. That whole role, there's very few people who can speak into like what you're going through. Unless you walk through that and carried that yourself, you don't have a lot of people around you. I can't run to, someone who's in youth ministry or kids ministry or our welcome team and say, hey, are you feeling this? Because they're going, no, I'm not feeling that. But, that's where it's like really important. Like I've got an unbelievable open door with Jeff to just go and, hey man, I'm wrestling with some stuff. I'm not feeling it today. And he goes, I get it. He actually does get it. It's hard to get that from anybody else. And I imagine bishops are in the same boat. Like if you've ever been a bishop, what that other bishop is going through, the weight of running the family. And, that's the other weight. Is like, if your family, your kids aren't doing well, or you have any sort of strain. I mean, from time to time, even those of us who have really good, solid marriages, we get a strain with our spouse, and then you got to get up and preach. It's like, how do you do that? So I think all of those things are the weights that kind of lead to burnout over the course of time that I know I've experienced.
I'd echo everything that Nate said. I would add two, like relationship dynamics within the church. So the church is filled with a lot of hurt people that they might not even be believers in the gospel yet. So you navigate that. There are a lot of people that have been burned out by church themselves, and they're seeking respite. There are people that you said the prestige of being the pastor, right? This is just a reality of ministry. There are people in the church that intentionally are trying to manipulate you for some kind of gain. And then once you kind of sense that, it's really difficult to continue to minister to them because you feel a little bit of resentment. Add all that, so what Nate said, plus the relationship dynamics, plus like the emotional drain of ministry, right? So on the outside, it looks like pastors just work for 2.5 hours on Sunday. It's absolutely, that's not true, right? So I had one particularly difficult week where I did the funeral for a child who was a drowning victim. And then I did marriage counseling for a couple that was on the precipice of divorce. And then I had my own family to care for. And then you have to get up on Sunday and preach to these people, right? So it's a pressure cooker that it's really difficult to understand until you're in it. But the pressure is relieved through kind of what Nate just alluded to, like real godly fellowship with people that have been through it or people that are going through it with you. Like the church that I pastor has a wonderful staff that practically any of them, I could walk into their office and just unload and say, like, please sit with me in this for a minute, right? Like, I need a pastor for a second, right? And vice versa. It's such, I have 2 doors in my office, and both of them that's my open door policy. It's super, right? Two open doors. Anyone can come in and kind of like decompress and process through that kind of stuff. And that's what keeps me going. I promise you I would have burned out years ago if it wasn't for the fellowship that I have with other leaders in the church.
Anything about, as far as sort of on another side of that, just as far as that being the main guy, at the church, and the validation, the glory, and making sure we're pointing that towards the source of glory. Anything as far as making sure that you don't get drunk on that validation?
Yeah, I think, well, I would say for me, I've seen this acutely close in so many levels, and so I think it's good when you are in any kind of leadership, influential role, to stay sober about that reality, to be reminded that, like you said, like that burnout, and not just burnout, but there's a lot of things that can come through that. And that's always a half a step away if I'm not walking with Jesus. Let's just be a flat out honest. That's not, I'm not talking miles away. I'm talking, it's a half a step. And so remaining sober about that reality, engaging in deep relationship. And like I said, I think um, walking with Jesus the way Jesus walks, right? I think, and not to overly simplify it, because it's actually not simple at all, but I think it's okay to be a creature, right? And I say those words intentionally. Like, I think we can get intoxicated with ourselves, and I think and we can become messiahs in our own mind. And we believe, we'll never verbally say this, but we believe we are beyond creature and we become creator. And I think remaining as creature, someone who is dependent, someone whose value is from someone else, someone whose energy and ability and wisdom is from someone else, that then means I gotta stay connected with whoever that's from, and walk in the rhythms and ways that bear fruit in my own soul. And so there's a lot I can say that, but those are the things that I would say, like, as you're wrestling with validation, that's a real wrestle. And let's be clear, every human being wants that validation. Every human being wants to be celebrated. Like, every human being does. So the question isn't whether you like it or want it. You do. Now, what will you do to guard your soul from being drunk in that desire? Like, what will you do to put things in your life and then to not, like, I think many leaders do, they lie to themselves. And it's easy to do so. So I just think those are things that are helpful as you are walking with the weight of leadership in any capacity that can guard your soul and your life.
Yeah. Awesome. Any other thoughts around that topic?
Yeah, real quick, I would say I think it's important to build a culture too, where the number one guy in your church is Jesus, and it's not
Yes.
you, and that
Yes.
starts with you. It starts with, and it starts with
Yes.
the little subtle things too, right? So, people will tell me every single Sunday, whether or not they're good sermons, I don't know, but they'll come up to me and they'll say, like, that was a really good word, really great sermon, Pastor. And I'm like, well, praise God. Like, I'm glad that God used me, a broken vessel, to communicate to you. But there's a danger in swinging that pendulum too far the other way, right? And you do need encouragement. And so what I've done is, over the years, I collect I call them like the greatest hits of encouragement. So these are handwritten notes or cards or things like that from people in the church, and this is part of what keeps me going. Right, when I'm down and I need encouragement, I'll go back and I'll be like, Kyle, that is almost a decade worth of encouragement. Read how the Lord used you, and then it fills me back up, and it's a really humbling experience of like, well, if He used me in the past 10 years, maybe He'll continue to use me for another 10.
Yeah, that's great.
I agree.
That's great.
Yeah.
I think I would just speak to what Kyle was saying there about culture. The culture is what I'm learning. There's language around this. If we create a soil which allows humility and joy and delight to sprout, or it allows kind of some selfish, dark things to sprout, depending on the soil. And that's very much a role that a lead pastor has to take with the other leaders around him. That's a discussion that I'm in with my board right now, of like, how do we create that proper soil in order to not allow the dark things to rise, whether it's egotism or narcissism or whatever. And let's be real, it's a big problem. That's one of the epidemics in the evangelical church. We have had our fair share of narcissistic leaders rise and fall, and it happens in very big churches, and it happens in very small churches, and it's an incredibly sad and destructive thing. And as a pastor, I think in this climate, when we've seen that happen a fair amount recently, we just got to be real careful about how we look inward, and we be real honest with our own stuff. And then there's safe people to let in on that, and making sure that we're not setting ourselves up as something that we're not, which can be super tempting to do.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that. The thing is that I don't know as much about with Kyle, but I've got to guess just from a statistical standpoint. But I know for a fact that Nate, and I know for a fact that Curtis, and I know for a fact me, we have been tied to multiple people who have functioned in ministry, who have had very serious fallings in whatever capacity, whether it be moral failure, whether it be mental health issue, whether it be family blowout or stuff like that. So a healthy pastor is not a pastor who has it all together. A healthy pastor is one, like Curtis said, that knows. It reminds me of what Billy Graham said one time. He had this whole thing where obviously he would never be in a room with another woman with the door closed, and the quote behind it always sticks with me. And he said, "It'll only take 5 seconds of indiscretion to obliterate 50 years of ministry." And I mean, that's how close we are, which is what Curtis is getting at. And that there's the other side of that too. Like, we can't get drunk on that affirmation, and it's one of the reasons why people have been saying, "Oh yeah, Pastor Jeff, you're in Utah, so you can plant a church, so you can just And I've told multiple people. My wife and I have talked about this ad nauseum. As long as Hello Saints is what it is, and people are recognizing Pastor Jeff and what I'm doing on YouTube, you're not going to find me anywhere close to planting a church, because people are going to be coming to the church to see Pastor Jeff, and I'm not interested in that. So I'll serve at other churches, I'll preach at other churches, but even whenever I preach, I don't announce it. Like, people be like, "Hey, can you put out a schedule when you're preaching?" I'm like, "No, because I don't want you to come seeing Pastor Jeff. If you want to try to find it online somewhere, that's fine." But that's how close all of us are to wanting to just like put our sails in the wind of that affirmation and let it take us away.
And oftentimes I frame, when a bishop is called, it's not just a calling for a one man, but it's a calling for a family. And that you alluded to a lot of this. I'm curious, just from the perspective of your spouse, your wife, involving her or helping her feel a part of the ministry and those types of things. Like, what have you done to make sure that the calling is nurturing her heart as much as it is nurturing your heart?
Yeah, I think that's something that I think most pastors who are trying to be healthy have an awareness of the importance to be, first line of ministry is your family, right? And that relationship with your wife is so important. We understand that in principle, and I think a lot of us aspire to that, and we try to hold each other accountable to that. But it's hard. I mean, it's very difficult at times because ministry comes in waves. Inevitably, pastoral ministry does put a strain on marriages. And it can be very frustrating for a wife, especially depending on the season of life that you're in. If you're, full-time ministry pastoring, especially if you're in a higher role, like a lead role, while you're having babies and you got young kids, that can be super lonely for a wife. She's feeling like pastor husband's off doing his thing while I'm at home trying to deal with sleep deprivation and changing diapers. I think that can change as season of life changes for people, where you can, Joy and I are in a place right now where I think we're partnering more in ministry than we ever have, but it's also because our youngest is 7. So we're starting to get out of that phase. But, I know that it's been a learning process for me, if I'm going to be honest, about understanding how to truly care for, pour into, invest, and love my wife first and foremost, and attuning to what she's needing. And not only that, but attuning to her giftings and what she has to offer. And, just doing what you can to get behind that and allow the Holy Spirit to utilize her how she's been called, which is super important.
I want to speak to that, Jeff. I want to piggyback off of that. I think a lot of times, especially because this is a vocational full-time calling, within the evangelical world, the wife can get swept into that. Well, the church did not hire the wife, so there's a kind of an issue with that, because pastors' wives are not created the same. They're all different, and their gifting is way different. It's what Jeff is speaking to. It's like, you're going to have the pastor's wife who is just really amazing with one-on-one conversations with other ladies. That's her thing. And then you're going to have a pastor's wife who's incredibly musical, and so she'll serve on the worship team, and that's her thing. My wife happens to be amazing with kids, and she serves in our kids ministry. She doesn't run it. She's not the director of it. She just serves in it, teaches week in and week out. The thing that I think we have to do with our wives more than anything is make sure that they're feeling loved and valued within the calling and the spiritual gifts that they've been given, and not becoming all things to all people, because the natural inclination is for people to have unwritten expectation, unspoken expectations of our wives.
And sometimes spoken expectations.
Yeah, and sometimes spoken.
Yeah, very much so.
When it gets really hurtful, sometimes it gets spoken, and then they feel the weight of those expectations from time to time. But I think that's a careful dynamic. I know there's been seasons of my life where my wife has felt like she's thriving. She's currently in a season like that where she's thriving in ministry, and we're partnering in ministry. But I'm letting her, not that I'm letting her, but I'm saying, go do that ministry that you feel best equipped to do, most gifted to do, but not me expecting her to be something that she's not either, which I think sometimes, can be hurtful as well. As if I'm like, hey, you really need to be really great with all these one-on-one conversations. And my wife's like, no, I'm really good with kids. That's not my thing.
So I'm here. Many of you are probably familiar with sort of the structure of our church. Like we have such rigid boundaries, and you move to an area, you have a ward or a congregation assigned to you. That's sort of the expectation when you'll go to the church and on Sundays and who you'll be with and those types of things. There's sometimes this perception, it's maybe a misconception, that there's this constant tension of increasing membership. And I'm curious, especially with Jeff and Curtis, is your dynamic, you're in the same area, and like, how do you reconcile that tension where, you know, you want more people showing up on Sunday, but you also don't want to hurt Curtis's church down the way, if, you know, take from his flock per se. But really, anybody, I mean, Evangelical can go anywhere he wants, whether it's 2 hours away or 5-minute walk or wherever it is. Anything come to mind with that tension? Is that misconception? Is that really a huge pressure on you?
Well, for me, I would say it's not right now, right? I think prior one, just like the whole validation. I think any of these things can become a thing in your own soul and in your mind. I would say that it's something that the reason why it's not is because I'm always preaching against it in my own mind. You know, like I have to, I'm preaching against the reality. Like, man, the Lord is the Lord is in control of who walks in and when. He just calls me to steward the gift of the Spirit that He's given me, the gifts He's given me, and what He does with that gifting is on Him. He's the owner. I'm just a steward. And so, and I'm not saying that because I got all together. I'm saying it because I got to tell myself that so I don't get to grab after things, right? And I think part of also has helped is, like you named, the partnership that Jeff and I have had. Like I've been blessed in ministry to always have partners who we really are not. We don't talk about numbers. That's not a conversation. Jeff and I were never legitimately talked a lot. That's not the conversation we've ever had, you know? So you need people, and when you have those kind of relationships, that detoxes anything around that as well. When it was just purely, our partners was like, hey man, we just want to support people and point to Jesus. What He does with that's between Him and I. And we were always speak, of affirmation about each other's church. We would send people to each other's church, be like, you should go to their church, you know? So because that was our partnership and relationship, and I've been blessed to have that over the years, that's allowed it to not be a deep struggle, but it constantly can be if I let it be.
Yeah, in the Midwest, man, it can get pretty bad with that
Really
church
quick.
competition thing. And, you know, the stuff that, you know, we were doing with Curtis's church, there's a Lutheran church right down the road, Zion Lutheran.
Yep.
There's another church across town. We were almost, I was doing this, and Curtis and I, we would get together once every few weeks and have lunch just to build that. I mean, 10 years ago, we started doing that just because we wanted to have that type of relationship, because both of us, I think we shared a vision for the church of Belleville. Like we want people to see a reputation of Jesus in the church in Belleville, just like you have the church in Ephesus and the church in Corinth, right?
Maybe I can unpack a little bit of the Utah thing. I've been here 22 years. I think this is like year 14 in full-time ministry. I've been on both sides of it, where my first stint in ministry was at Centerpoint Church. When I went there, it was a church of about 400. When I left there, it was a church of 1,000. I never, ever sensed anything internal there of like self-preservation, because we were a growing, thriving church, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And now being a part of a church that's about 160 people, and understanding more of the dynamic of like what church planters who come to Utah experience. Church planters are people who are starting brand new churches, and they're sent by a missions agency, and they're usually given 2 to 3 years to start a church. And they come to Utah, and it's a lot more like a 10-year challenge than a 2-year challenge of really establishing a church. And you know that your livelihood is on the line. And let me just say, that is a full-time work to get that off the ground. Like, I mean, anybody who's entrepreneurial and has started their own business knows the grit that it takes to start something. Well, when you're starting a church, you know, you've got to have all that grit, and I'll say it, there's a competitiveness there. you can't be gritty and competitive. You can't be gritty without being competitive in a certain lane. But then you got to be spiritually real and go, God has not called me to build a kingdom. He's called me to be a part of his kingdom, and we are just a small expression. And so you're wrestling with this. I belong to this big C church and the
Yeah.
little C church. And if I don't do the little C church and it doesn't grow enough, I don't get paid. So that is a whole different dynamic than most people probably realize. They just think, oh, that person came and their headquarters in Minneapolis is paying their way to do this. And maybe for 2 years,
And that's not enough in Utah.
it's not.
In that spirit of partnership, I'm just curious, because this is such a tricky thing. Just pivoting back to maybe the crux of this virtual summit, of that interfaith effort with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So I'm curious, like if one Sunday or one day you're in your office and 5 local Latter-day Saint bishops like show up and they're like, hey, we want to partner. We want to help. We want to healthy interfaith effort here. Like, how can we do that? Like, what would you say to them?
We're already starting to kind of have that here in Utah. Obviously, it's if it's happening anywhere, it's going to happen here first. I have an awesome relationship with Gary and Laura Griffiths. They walked into our church. They're not missionaries. Kurt, you might even know what they are, what their technical calling is, but they're an older couple. They probably served a couple missions already in their life, but they're assigned regionally to a number of evangelical, not just evangelical, other Christian churches. I think they attend the Catholic parish and all that.
Yeah, they're probably on the communications, the area communications council. But
is that what it is?
What we would call them? Yeah.
I just think it's a real strategic opportunity to connect with some wonderful people. They're incredibly supportive. I know we said, hey, you're welcome to participate here. We kind of have shared some things about a local thing up in Harriman called the Columbus Center, where we want to express some just some focus on, because they're doing a lot of things with people who are coming to Harriman, moving in and don't know English, and so we want to partner with them in that way. But they've made the initiation, and I've really enjoyed the relationship I've had with them. And in fact, I was pretty new when Gary and Laura started coming. I was pretty new to the lead pastor position, and I hadn't met the mayor of Harriman yet. And Gary made the connection, so we went and met the mayor together, and so it's been a really cool friendship and relationship. I'm open to that, and of course, there are going to be times when, in the course of those relationships, we might have more defining conversations around, doctrine and beliefs. But they're wonderful people that we really enjoy, and they're very servant-hearted. So I guess my response is, let's be open to that.
Yeah. When you first asked that question, my answer still is actually I don't know what I would say. I can tell you that the tone, or at least the heart behind what I would want to say, is curiosity and hospitality. So I can tell you, I say, okay, I would pursue curiosity and hospitality. What I would say, I actually don't know. Jeff's ministry with Hello Saints actually has been very impactful, especially for the area that I'm in, where I grew up, where it's like, actually that overlap has never happened, at least in my context. And so it was like, when you asked, I was like, well, I wonder if they even would show up. Like,
Yeah.
When the bishop even show up, I'm interested in showing up. So I was like, when you sound like, I don't even know. Like, I don't, have they ever? Would they? I don't even know.
They will now that we've talked about
Yeah,
it.
I know. I was like,
I'm searching the
no one's
bishops in
ever
your area.
asked me that. I was like, I know they're around. I don't know. But I just know enough where my heart will be to lean in with curiosity and hospitality.
Well, you're welcome to walk into our offices as well. So.
You'll be very welcome if you walk in.
Okay. It's very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, I think just because of who I am and my background, I mean, I've been doing inter-religious dialogues with Latter-day Saints for like 10 years. So if I went to my elders and I said, hey, I'd like to partner with some LDS bishops, they'd be like, okay. Just because that's, I don't know. They'd be like, no, Kyle wants to hang out with more Mormons, whatever. And I think it depends. Like somebody said, like define partnership, right? If the bishops are like, hey, we would love to like preach on a Sunday morning, and I'd be like, and I would love to talk at General Conference. If you can make that work, I'll give you one of our Sundays, right? So there's probably we found the wall, right, or the limit. But I mean, we live on the Gulf Coast. I've been through 2 hurricanes in the past 10 years, and inevitably one's going to come. And you know who's going to show up? LDS Disaster Relief from the Bishop's Storehouse. I've seen him before. We're going to see him again. And so there's clearly like what we would in the Protestant world called common grace, ways that God commonly blesses people. There's clearly ways that we can partner with there, and those are really interesting to me.
Awesome. Really great suggestions and thoughts. And this discussion has been great. Hopefully it inspires others that you see that they don't bite. I didn't bite, at least I hope. And you can have conversations. You can walk in each other's churches or sit down in the coffee shop and get yourself a nice warm cup of hot chocolate and share with share in the discussion. So I really appreciate this. Last question I have, and this is a question that's a traditional question I ask on the Leading Saints podcast at the end of an episode, because I think there is a unique dynamic that happens as you lead a flock. And I also want to give you opportunity to share a little bit of your witness of your Savior, Jesus Christ. And so maybe I'll start with Nate, and everybody else can start thinking of your response as well. But the question is this: as you reflect on your time as a leader in the church, how has being a leader helped you become a better follower of Jesus Christ?
That's a great question. One of the ways that, especially as I become a lead pastor and I start to see things from kind of a more of a 30,000 foot view of what's going on in the church, I've been gravitating towards seeing those people who are gifted in service. Like we call it service and helps as a spiritual gifting, and how they're constantly looking for an opportunity to do something for someone else. That is not my gifting. But that is still my calling. And so I've been thinking a lot about that recently. It's like, even though my gifting is probably more relational and one-on-one conversations or 1-on-5 conversations, doesn't matter. It's like very highly relational. My calling is to set an example like Jesus with washing feet. And so we don't have a building right now. And I kind of even hesitate saying this, but my wife, we meet at a charter school, and the bathrooms are not great. And my wife is a servant, and she's like, we got to make sure these bathrooms are, usable and clean. And I want to do that for everybody who walks in the door of the church, our members, the people who may be coming for the first time. That I don't want them to have, it's that spirit of hospitality, to just make sure everything is okay for everybody. And so she's been cleaning the bathroom. She's got a team of ladies, and I get there, we get there at the same time. We get there around, 2.5 hours before our service starts. and we're setting up, and we have to tear down. It's the kind of church we are right now because we're meeting in a school. And over the last couple of weeks, I've been cleaning the men's bathroom. That is not something that I had eyes on. That's not something that I signed up to do. That's not something that I enjoy. but it's necessary for me to like really understand what Jesus means with being a leader. And so I'm starting to clean toilets. My wife does the women's bathroom. I'm doing the men's bathroom. There's a lot of times where she's way better and faster, and so she gets further along and finishes some stuff before I even get in there. But it's just this idea of like when Jesus calls us into leadership, he calls us into servant leadership. It's not about, hey, look at me, I'm this amazing leader, gifted communicator, whatever. It's showing the kind of love that Jesus shows us. He lays down his life for us. And that's really what love is. I mean, the word agape is sacrificial love. And if we're not exhibiting that as leaders, we're not leading like Jesus did.
Yeah. Yeah. Kyle, what about you? How's being a leader helped you become a better follower of Jesus Christ?
Yeah, I think probably one of the biggest lessons I've learned with just over a decade of like ministry leadership experience is that leaders often, or I say it like this, leaders more often operate out of character than they do competency. Like your ministry training does not prepare you for every single scenario. There's not like a playbook or necessarily a rule book for pastoring a flock of God's people. And so what I've learned is that spiritual leadership has pushed me into cultivating in myself the Christian virtues, so that when scenarios happen that I couldn't have foreseen or wouldn't have expected or even welcomed, my default is to operate out of a God-honoring character rather than anything else. And that's been a really sanctifying process for me too. As Nate said, like humility is one of those, right? But also love, gentleness, kindness, respect, all of the Christian virtues, right? I've been really, really pressed into. I'm not perfect. I've got hundreds of thousands of miles to go. But one of the blessings I've received from being a Christian leader is God is using the position to sanctify me to look more like his son.
Awesome. Curtis, what about you?
Yeah, man. When I think about the question you said, how does leading help me in following? And when it's all said and done, I'm in this Christian thing because Jesus invited me into a lifelong walk with him. And so at the end of the day, whatever he calls me to, gifts me to do, invites me into, it's to the end of knowing him and being known by him.
Mm-hmm.
And so leadership isn't, what I've learned over the decades is leadership isn't really merely what I do for him. Actually, I think it's primarily a means of knowing him deeply and being known by him. And then he uses me to bless other people. But it's a source of sanctification and relationship building with my Savior. And so every opportunity of leadership is opportunity when I'm in a counseling appointment, when I'm scheduling a meeting, when I'm with my staff. That is an opportunity to invite him into that moment, into that space, and experience him and whatever case. If I'm overwhelmed, if I'm scared, if I'm nervous, if I'm joyful, it's an opportunity just to walk with him in that moment. Because at the end of the day, we're not going to be in heaven talking about what we're leading. We're going to be in heaven talking about who I'm walking with. And so at the end of the day, leadership or whatever capacity he's called us to function, whether leadership, business, or whatever, it's in the lens of how is that helping me know and walk with him more. And leadership gives prime opportunity for him to be invited into so many aspects of my life. And I get to just see him more and see him active in my life and get to know his heart a bit more every day.
Love it. Jeff, what about you? You can lead us out here.
Yeah. For me, there's this, growing up in a Christian church, in a Christian home, in a sanitized Christian environment, there's a lot of sentimentality that can get infused with a faith walk. And maybe even a bit of romance tied to, this whole idea of following Jesus, especially for someone in my position, which I just grew up at a pretty, even keel privileged life. And then, so when you get into ministry, though, you realize really quick that the sentimentality isn't going to carry you. The romance of ministry, the romance of even following Jesus really starts to experience dissonance when you start to recognize, oh, okay, I get it. So when Jesus says, if you follow me, you're going to suffer. When he says, when you follow me, you're going to have to sacrifice. Oh, this is kind of what he's talking about. Because people let you down. You're betrayed. Your best efforts don't always produce fruit. You do feel burnt out. Your family does get hit. So I think for me, what's helped me most in my relationship with Jesus by being in ministry is him helping me understand that following him is not just about sentimentality, but it is about sacrifice. He came to sacrifice. Now, it was a sacrifice driven by love, but it can't be this whole romantic, sentimental deal. And I think that's why so many pastors get disillusioned and disenchanted. I think that's why a lot of Christians get so disillusioned and disenchanted. So I've just been really grateful, and it's really hard for me to say because I've walked through some hell. Curtis can attest to it. He's walked alongside me as I've walked through hell. Curtis has walked through hell. I've seen him walk through a lot of stuff being in pastoral ministry. But why are we still doing it? Well, because he's showing us his mission and his ministry to us.
Yes.
By allowing us to experience the loss, the vacancy, and the need to call on the Father. So that's what I've learned.
That's it, buddy.
All right, that concludes my interview with these phenomenal pastors. Really appreciate their time entertaining my questions. I learned a lot. I hope you did as well. Again, remember to go sign up for the Hello Saints Virtual Summit that's happening right now. There's still time to see all the videos. And if you are listening this far into the future and just want to still access the content, just visit hellosaints.com and you'll find all the information you need there to access the content.